Good evening and welcome to this special study session meeting of Tuesday, January 28th. I call the meeting to order. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Please say with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, tonight we'll have our staff presentation and then we will have public comment following the presentation. So, Ms. Green, will you please read the title?
First of all, let the record reflect that all council members are present except Councilmember Mansour. And then the title is the Proposed Information Technology Strategic Plan Roadmap for the City of Costa Mesa. Presentation by Mr. Ely, Information Technology Director.
Thank you. Mr. Ely?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. In this study session, I will present a view into the IT department's current processes and responsibilities. Following my presentation, the department's consultant, Roy Hernandez from Third Wave Corporation, will present the executive summary of the department's strategic plan, followed by a funding plan by the Director of Finance. We're going to go over a department overview of the IT department. We're going to talk about services and technology systems overview, and then I'm going to do a recap. The department is separated into three areas: administration with 2 full-time employees, 1 part-time management analyst. There's a network operations side with 1 supervisor, 3 network engineers. We have 1 new engineer recently approved through the quarterly review. In our systems and programming, we have 1 supervisor, 3 full-time programmers. We recently added 1 programming position that will be dedicated to the LMS system that's currently planned, and 1 part-time programmer. The department aligns itself with council goals and priorities, specifically Goal 1, keeping our community safe. Goal 3, keeping the city fiscally sustainable to address our long-term obligations as well as our immediate needs. And Goal 6, good government and community engagement. IT is a full-service department, meaning we provide all technology services to every city department. This graph shows 18 sites the department provides services to. All hardware, software, and connectivity is our responsibility. It's a pretty busy slide, but every one of those buildings is one of the 18 sites. We can look at down in the lower left corner there, you see 6 fire stations. So we're responsible as an IT department to make sure the switches and firewalls for all of those stations, their desktop, their software is all up and maintained. Going to talk a little bit about services and technology. So looking at technology infrastructure and our assets, we have a data center with our server room. We manage 2 networks, separate networks, City Hall and Public Safeties. In that data center, we are responsible for the power distribution units that supply power to the racks where the servers are and our SANs. We also are responsible for the camera solutions around City Hall, the PD campus, and most recently, just last year, the shelter. We also provide data circuits, obviously, to every of those 18 sites. We also maintain Wi-Fi network solutions. Multiple switches, routers, 11 firewalls we're responsible for. That is basically our gate from the outside world getting into our network. Those firewalls have a lot of definitions and we need to maintain them. The same department is responsible for all mobile devices in the city, all tablets. And we handle more than 90 terabytes of data across this city. We have 2 backup tape libraries, on-site and off-site storage for redundancy and response time. We handle all the email messaging infrastructure, supporting 954 mailboxes, and this basically equates to about 300,000 emails in a month from internal and external. One of the other sides of our responsibility is cybersecurity. The Network Operations Department is constantly monitoring for cybersecurity threats. We continuously monitor for such vectors such as viruses, denial of service, email phishing, ransomware. We monitor threat activities, false positives, true threat migration. We minimize our exposure by deploying layers of security, employee education, monitoring of our firewalls, and then also metadata monitoring. We have to be compliant with all regulatory requirements, HIPAA, DOJ, CJIS. The same group, the operations group, has a spam filter that monitors upwards of 154,000 emails external just coming in from the outside into the city's network within a 30-day period. And many of those we actually block because they're viruses. And just to note here, one of our vendors, Barracuda Networks, reported that 2/3 of the 2019 U.S. ransomware attacks targeted state, county, and local governments. And I have a couple there. Baltimore had a ransomware attack that took the city services offline. Email, online payments, everything is down. In July in Atlanta, same thing, a ransomware attacked the city's network there. All police officers had to use manual means to do reports by hand, city employees, manual timesheets. It's a very, very important area that we have to maintain, and it's just not here at City Hall, it's all of those 18 sites. Public safety system highlights for the police. We monitor, or we manage 495 Active Directory accounts that have to be CJIS and FBI, DOJ compliant. We handle all of the dispatching needs, technology needs for dispatch. Multiple police systems, including their CAD, their computer-aided dispatch, their RMS, record management system, JMS, their jail management system, is all handled by this department. We also maintain all integrations with the county, state, courts, and other law enforcement agencies. This same group is responsible for all the MDCs that you've recently heard about. We have to maintain that operating system on those MDCs, the connectivity, and the vendor software. We also maintain the license plate readers, AVL integration, the auto vehicle locator integration with the computer-aided dispatch system, 24/7, 365 support. We're on call for the police and fire. We also manage the closed cellular network for that CJIS system. And then also, just within the last couple years, we now handle their 52 auto citers, which is basically a tablet they use for writing citations. So this graph is a little busy, but basically what it signifies is that we have 20 systems that we're responsible for maintaining and making sure that they're up. I'm not going to go into a lot of this, but I'm going to show you just the RMS, the record management system, and basically what's behind that and what we're responsible for, because every one of these shapes and these modules that you see on this, we have to maintain. And it's not only that, it's that lion in between. It's the interface, and how that data moves around is our responsibility. This is a look at the police department record management system, how the information comes in through a 911 call and how that gets filtered out through the rest of the system. We need to make sure that this CAD system, Central Square, and their RMS, JMS is up and operational. Information that needs to go out to the public through crime mapping. We need to make sure that that's maintained. Any system that you see here, we need to make sure that that connection to the courts is always up and running. And then what I'd like to do here is just invite Acting Chief Glass to make some comments about this.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. I'm excited and supportive of the proposed IT five-year strategic plan, due to technology being a critical component and need in today's law enforcement environment. Technology is continuously evolving to meet the needs of contemporary law enforcement agencies for us to provide quality services to the communities we serve. It's hard to truly see how integrated technology is in the police department's daily operations and how the department's law enforcement is on technology for continuity, interoperability, and connectivity to access and interface with other agencies and systems. Just to give a simple example, in the middle of the week, in the early AM hours, when we're all asleep, there are at least 20 members of the police department working who are reliant upon the technology and systems in place to perform their job and provide services. This includes staff from communications, patrol services, records, and the jail. These individuals are utilizing technology and systems to operate and receiving, disseminate, and researching information needed for the call they are handling at any time. This utilization and need for technology, interoperability, and connectivity magnifies intensely during an average day of the week when all aspects of the police department are operating and performing their daily duties and responsibilities, which could get up to 85 to 90 employees working. As part of the IT strategic plan that cannot be emphasized enough is the need for additional staff. The police department previously had 2 full-time IT staff members specifically assigned to the department with a third assisting as required. That is not the case now. Currently, the department has 1 IT staff member assigned to the department as a part-time basis, 2 days a week. This is not sufficient and adequate for an agency of our size with 24/7 operations throughout the year. In other agencies, public safety generally has a full-time dedicated team to address IT needs and support. The IT strategic plan here begins the process of improving upon our current situation. And again, thank you for this opportunity to speak on the IT strategic plan and its importance to the police department and the city organization as a whole.
Thank you. Now we're going to look at Fire CAD RMS. We are responsible for making sure that the 129 users of this system, all of their technology equipment in 6 fire stations, there are 25 fire vehicles with MDCs in them. We manage and monitor the integrated alerting system. So as dispatch sends the call out to the fire stations, that alerting system, we're responsible for that. Again, a closed cellular network with on the public safety side. And then we also need to make sure that connectivity, similar with the courts as the PD side, but connectivity with Orange County Fire Authority, Metronet, and City Hall is up. There's a big factor with telestaff and payroll. We need to make sure that those modules are up and running for their scheduling and payroll. Their electronic patient care reporting, EVP, their emergency vehicle preemption, all the connections to that. We have 25 in-vehicle computers that allow the crews to receive incident information in its locations. There's about 30 station computers that we're responsible for maintaining for incident reporting and training. And then the same thing with FireCAD RMS, there's an element of a record management system similar to what I showed you with police. All of those particular shapes are modules that have to be maintained and up to date and active at all times. And with that, what I'd like to do is bring up Chief Stefano and make some comments.
Thank you, Steve. Madam Mayor, members of the council, appreciate this opportunity. For starters, thank you for your unwavering support for public safety. We realize that it's part of the larger city team, but there's a specific nuance with public safety, and as Acting Chief Glass spoke to, a lot of the things are very similar in terms of what we have. As a city, we talk about a city that had over 600 employees at one point in time, and now we're at the 470 mark, somewhere thereabouts. So with that, you have to make up that gap through a lot of different things. And I think everyone in the city has done an incredible job working very hard. But some of those components that we have to make sure we're on top of our infrastructure. And that goes to the physical infrastructures we have, such as the new fire station that we're very thankful for. We have a new library, the facilities here that we're sitting in. but also the technology infrastructure. It's so important to what we do. We have on a daily basis, minimum 27 people, 24/7, 365 days a year that are attached to that IT process that we have to have, that infrastructure. The folks that we have in the IT department do an incredible job, but I think as you all realize, it's not enough in terms of that staffing piece. And so this strategic plan covers that in terms of the staffing. It covers some of the key components, not just a one-year plan, but a 5-year plan that's going to build in some things that is going to carry us through. But this plan has the full support of public safety, both police and fire, and that's why both Acting Chief Glass and myself are here, and we would appreciate your consideration in that support. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Another look at the programming side of the house. So we handle all the major business systems with the city. We develop and maintain software systems supporting city business processes. That programming group does system analysis. They design, programming, development, and integration of applications. There's a huge piece in the programming staff of reporting. Crystal reports, that type of thing. A lot of systems have to produce reports, so we have to be able to go into the database and pull that information out and build that report, and that's part of our process with the other departments. That same group also manages database administration, so there's about 50 databases across 144 virtual and physical servers that we're responsible for. The same group also does user training on a lot of the modules that we have there. The development and support of online services for the public. So besides the in-house type of applications, we have multiple online services and applications that we need to make available to the public. Some of them are vendor bought, but some of them are in-house, and so we have to maintain those. But there's always an increasing demand for these online services. And also that same group is responsible for some of the mobility and city mobile apps and the connectivity. This busy slide is just the view of our major business systems. You can see enterprise land management there on the left. In the center, financial ERP. So the darker shades are ones that are planned. Right now, we're working with implementing land management systems. Up next is the financial ERP. I believe we're in the process of writing that RFP at this point. And so what we did is we kind of highlighted those and let you know what we're up against in the coming years. And again, all of these modules in these boxes here have to be maintained, and those interfaces in between those connections have to be maintained. The operations staff is also a help desk. We're in charge of about 1,000 Active Directory users across the 18 facilities, software and hardware deployment, manage the mailboxes, support smart TVs in the city, all of our mobile remote access for the laptops, all of the secure VPN connections we're responsible for. And then again, inside the data center, we're responsible for all the virtual hosts that house our servers. 453 desktops, 129 laptops, 413 city-owned printers. It falls under our purview. And then, of course, tablets, specialized equipment, receipts, credit card readers, you name it. It all falls under the IT shop. Programming, same area. Development, analysis of support of all departments. This department also maintains 200 GIS layers for the city. We have 20 GIS applications in support of all police, fire, community development, and online mapping applications for citizens. And so just to recap my presentation here, we handle all computer systems serving the community. All of our major complex systems have not been replaced in over 20 years. Some systems are no longer supported by vendors. And currently, right now, there's no financial plan in place for any modernization or replacement of this. And I also want to thank the city for approving the development of this strategic plan. I know it's been a long time in the making, but I really feel like we have a good, solid plan here. And from somebody that's ex-military, I like to follow a plan, so. But we need to plan to replace and modernize these systems and increase the staffing phased over the 5 years at a sustainable cost. I mean, right now, with the staff that we have, we're walking a very thin line. I mean, there are times when I hope that I wake up and I don't have that call that says we've been hacked and our network is down. It's those kind of things that kind of keep you, awake. But I do believe that with your support, we can fix this. So thank you. Now what I'm going to do is turn it over to Roy, who's going to talk about the strategic plan and its development.
Okay, thank
Roy.
you.
Madam
I'm
Mayor,
sorry,
council members,
What was your last name?
Hernandez.
Hernandez. Okay, thank you.
Roy Hernandez.
Thanks.
Madam Mayor, council members, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here tonight. We're very happy to get here to present our findings. Whoops. So this is our agenda. We're going to walk through the goals and objectives of the project, look at the recommendations. We'll briefly go over the ITSP initiatives, the projects that were identified, and then we'll talk about the roadmap and the investment model that we've identified. And at the very end, we'll talk about benefits to the constituents, this community, as well as the city. A couple of thoughts here before we get into the presentation. A little bit of philosophy before technology. But with technology, this is really true. If you don't know where you're going, we could say if you don't know where you're going, any system will do. And we don't want that. We want systems that are responsive, cost-effective, foster innovation, and more importantly, that they are responsive to the city and this community. So we also believe in a plan before proceeding with investments in technology. So one of the questions that we have to address at the onset is today there are many emerging technologies, and this is really exciting. We have a lot to pick from, a lot of opportunities. But the thing that we want to focus on is which are the right technologies for this city. So let's talk about the goals and objectives. First and foremost, we believe very strongly that one of the first goals is to develop a plan that is actionable. We started with a few foils that were philosophy, but when it comes to actually a plan, making a plan, we want to come up with initiatives that are actionable. Secondly, we want to recommend technology that is viable. In this case, we're talking about technology that is strategic and will work for the city today in 5 years and hopefully 10 or 15 years. We are also very concerned in coming up with a plan that's financially responsible. We want to make sure that the roadmap is well thought out when it comes not only to technology, but investment as well. And then again, we want to be responsive to the community. This process that we went through to develop the IT strategic plan had a very strong emphasis on engagement. And so we spent a significant amount of time talking to the management team, talking to staff. We did a survey for the public. So we collected a lot of data. In this particular case, this is the data that came back from the staff survey. And we asked staff to comment on what they thought were the things that needed the most improvement. And the items here with the checks were the ones that came out. So implementation planning, project management, project delivery, and end user training. We also asked the community, how are we doing? How's the city doing? What do they see? And on the customer service rating, the city came out really, really well. In fact, these are the highest ratings we've seen for any city in the last 10 years. So kudos to the city of Costa Mesa. On the online service delivery, getting services online today has really become commonplace, and the public expects it. And this particular chart here illustrates it, that your community sees online services as being very important. One of the other components of our project, which entails holding 31 half-day workshops, and this is really amazing. The participation and engagement of city staff and management was outstanding. And the graphic that we see here, this is an example of the output from these 31 workshops. And what we did here is we looked at 31 mission-critical business processes, things that staff at the city do here in providing services, and we map them out graphically. And anywhere where you see a red number, that's a bottleneck. And so one of the objectives of this process was business process improvement. And so we did these workshops with staff, and we identified with them where were the opportunities for improvement. As we can see here, attendance was very high. 214 staff members participated. We identified 67 technology solutions, and we came up with more than 700 potential benefits to the city. So this was really a fantastic data set to draw from in informing the final strategic plan. In terms of a vision, this is our vision statement. And so what we're looking for is developing a plan that fosters the use of proven technologies in the most strategic and innovative fashion possible. The plan also takes into account cost effectiveness and delivering efficient internal and external customer service. And the last line is really the bottom line. We want a plan that will foster civic participation and community well-being. So some of the objectives of the plan: we want to provide extraordinary customer service, which it looks like you're already doing based on your survey from the public. And we want to yield operational excellence. We want to support what the city does more cost effectively. We want to make the best use of limited staff resources. We want to increase accountability and transparency to the public as well as internally. And we do want to foster innovation and transformational change. So I will go through some of our findings and recommendations. So what we have here is 2 columns of potential technology initiatives. On the left-hand side, I'm not going to go through all of these, but on the left-hand side, these are the initiatives that made it into the plan. The column on the right are initiatives that we determined to be determined initiatives. And we went through a process of prioritizing all the potential opportunities that we have with implementing technology. In other words, you can see here, there are a lot more items and opportunities that were identified than we included in the plan. Because we recognize that staff resources are limited, financial resources are limited. So we went through a process to prioritize initiatives, and the ones on the left were the ones that made it through the process. Okay? And I'd like to just mention a couple of them on the left-hand side that are key. One of the first ones is the enterprise content management strategy, which is an enterprise software. And that's a tool or a software that is used to manage all the city's records and documents. And it affects every department. It will provide a benefit for every department across the city. And it is one of those systems that we identified as being key. The other 2 are the ERP system, which is underway, which is all the financial modules. And then the third item that we felt was important in this particular case was moving to Office 365. But all of these applications on the left-hand side will have the highest potential benefit and return on investment to the city and the community. The items on the right are things that were identified. We did not want to lose them. We parked them off here. And as funds become available or resources become available, or after we implement the ERP system, some of these other enterprise systems like the line management system or the ERP system, it may be that those applications may in fact provide some of the functionality of the applications that are listed on the right-hand side. I talked about prioritizing these initiatives. This is the criteria that we used. We want systems that address operational needs. We want to improve productivity. Of course, we want to focus on customer service, cost savings, operational cost savings primarily, and then increase revenue wherever the opportunity exists. Okay? So here's our findings and recommendations. Number 1, and it really was number 1, was the exposure of the existing financial system, which needs to be replaced. So obviously the recommendation here is to upgrade or replace the existing system. Secondly, the city lacks a variety of key software, and some of that software is listed on the previous slide. The third item that we identified as being key was the fact that the IT organization lacks capacity. And Steve has alluded to it already. And so our recommendation in here is to align the IT staffing model and resources with the plan. And then the other item here, which will become more important as we move forward in the next 5 years, is to have a formal IT governance process. And IT governance basically is a process where you put something in place that ensures that before anything is purchased related to IT, you actually go through a process of determining requirements, determining whether that solution fits the enterprise architecture of the city. You go through a process of developing a justification for that expenditure, and then you buy it. But it's got to pass those three things. If it doesn't pass that, you probably shouldn't do it. So we're recommending that that type of process be implemented. Again, staffing became something that came up over and over again. So we're talking about adding additional resources in response to the implementation of the initiatives of the plan. In other words, we are not proposing that all additional resources be provided day one. We can phase additional resources as projects come online. The acting police chief already talked about the public safety systems, and so we recommend highly that in-car video cameras and mobile data computers be part of the plan as a high priority item. Other things that had nothing to do with technology but are equally important was to implement disaster recovery policies. And this can be disaster recovery, business continuity, and cybersecurity. So we thought that was key. And then the last item, which is something we actually heard from your staff, is the need to provide training on the technology that the city uses so that city staff can make the optimum use of those systems and the city can gain the maximum return on that investment. Okay? So now we're going to talk about the roadmap investment and some of the benefits. So we identified dozens of opportunities. We went through the prioritization process, and these were the projects that made it through that prioritization sequence that we went through. We laid the projects out over 5 years. We took into account a number of things. For example, you wouldn't want to do all your biggest projects in year one because the city can only absorb so much technology at once. Even if you had all the money that you needed, it probably would not be prudent. So we looked at a number of factors, excuse me, feasibility. And then the other thing we looked at is relationship between projects, because sometimes projects have predecessors. So before you can do one thing, you have to do another thing. For example, you might need to upgrade a network before you implement a system. So we looked at a number of technology, operational, and financial issues, and we laid out the projects over 5 years. The light color, there's a light color bar and a dark color bar. The light color bar indicates the time required for the procurement process, because these systems are not going to show up here magically. You need to do requirements, you need to write an RFP, you got to go through that process. And then the dark color bar is what we estimate those systems to take from an implementation standpoint. Okay? At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly.
Can you go back to that slide just
Sure.
quickly? Just to clarify. So under month, it would take 2 months for that first line, 3 months for the second, 4, and then 2 months. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And you can see the ERP finance, the first item in year one.
16 months.
Yeah. So some of these projects are big. So okay, with that, I will turn it over to Kelly.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The question before all of you tonight is, how much is this going to cost us? This slide shows the cost of each system Mr. Hernandez just went over. These represent approximate costs of the software, hardware, and implementation. As you can see, certain items are marked as funded. For instance, the desktop replacement program will be recommended in the next budget cycle to be funded by existing fund balance in the IT replacement fund. In addition, if you recall, City Council has already set aside $2.1 million for the replacement of the ERP system. This will fund a large portion of the modules that we will implement over the next few years. The total cost of the recommended systems is estimated to be between $1.1 million and $2.3 million each year, for a total estimated cost of $8.1 million over 5 years. As you can see, there are a number of items that are included in the future or TBD section that require a deeper assessment before a solution can be recommended. Those systems are anticipated to cost approximately $1.8 million. However, some of these needs may be addressed, as Mr. Hernandez mentioned, they may be addressed with other systems such as the land management system or the ERP system. As we started to finalize the plan for the system needs, we took a look at the staffing levels and the operating budget of the City of Costa Mesa's IT department and compared it to other cities in our area. As you can see, Costa Mesa is at the bottom of the list and is understaffed compared to other cities. Yet they provide the same support to public safety, development services, public services, and all of the departments within the city. It is also one of the lowest from a funding level at only 3% of the general fund's budget. Another important comparison was historical experience of the department. Back in fiscal year 9-10, Costa Mesa's IT department had 15 budgeted FTEs. Flash forward to current levels, and the IT department has 10 FTEs, yet they support more systems in a more challenging environment. Some of the more notable changes in the technology environment Mr. Ely spoke about include an increased need for cybersecurity and physical security, e-discovery, managing all of the city's mobile devices, and even database management has nearly doubled to over 50 databases that they now maintain. We already spoke about the costs of each system, but we didn't talk about the costs of the support that will be needed to support these systems. The plan recommended 2 new FTEs over the next 5 years. However, knowing that we have budgetary constraints, we felt that it was responsible to recommend the most critical positions, which will support the new systems we don't currently have in place. Therefore, we are recommending 7 new FTEs over the next 5 years, and have placed the additional 3 in the TBD column until funding becomes available. It is also important to note that the staff costs shown here represent the first year only. Costs for these employees will move into the general fund in year 2 and beyond. So how are we going to pay for all of this? After the fiscal year 1920 budget development process, the Finance and Pension Advisory Committee asked staff to revisit the Capital Asset Needs Ordinance, which requires 6.5% of general fund revenues to be set aside for capital. In discussions with the committee, as Chief Stefano pointed out, technology is another type of infrastructure improvement. It is an intangible asset. In discussions with our Public Services Director, we concluded that the capital improvement program would be okay with a reduction of the capital asset needs set aside from 6.5% to 5%. Based on our forecast for fiscal year 2021, this equates to just over $7 million of general fund money. The remaining 1.5% is recommended to be repurposed to pay for the 5-year plan you are seeing tonight. 1.5% represents approximately $2 million per year. As you can see, that is sufficient to pay for the projected costs each year and will allow for additional funding if actual costs are higher than the estimated ones you see tonight. It will also provide funding for some of the projects in the TBD column once solutions are identified, as well as for technology improvements beyond the 5 years and into the future. I'd also like to note that the funding plan has been reviewed and approved by the Finance and Pension Advisory Committee, who voted in favor of reducing the Capital Asset Needs Ordinance and did see a priority for the IT strategic plan to be funded and implemented.
So what do we get for the investment? The next question. Thank you. So what do we get for the investment is the next question. So what we did in the course of the project, as we went through and collected data from the management team, from staff, from the online survey, we tabulated all the opportunities and potential benefits of making this investment. And so what we have here is that tabulated data. And so this is not our opinion. This is data that came from staff and the project. So if we look at, and there were many, there's several dozen types of benefits. We just took the top 10. And if we look at the top 3, staff time savings, improved customer service, and increased productivity are what rise to the surface. And from our perspective, even though these are not quantified in the form of a cost-benefit analysis per se, it does give us a feeling for the magnitude of the potential benefit. So we believe that this provides a compelling business case for investing and approving the IT strategic plan. So next steps, Third Wave recommends that the city adopt the 5-year plan, and that at a minimum that the first year be funded and allowed to proceed. And the first steps, as already has started, was to pursue the procurement of the ERP system, which is needed, and then resource the IT positions for phase 1, and then proceed with the year 1 initiatives of the plan. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Excellent. Council, if there's any questions, if you want to ask for the queue. Councilman McGinnis.
Oops, oh, my mic, yes, okay. I noticed that you did mention public safety as one of, Mr. Ely did, as one of the top priorities. And there were a number of things listed, and the one thing I didn't see was data management for crime stat analysis. And is that included in this package? For example, we used to have, when we did the ordinance on motels, we had a lot of data on specific land uses and the number of calls that we would get from specific sites, and those. So you could use it for planning, plus you use it for deployment of your resources as well. Mm-hmm. And would that be part of this package?
Acting Chief Glass, is that a question for you?
So to pull a history on these locations, we usually use our CAD RMS system. All the input from calls, anything the officers are doing is put in there. So we use that right now to track those locations and pull up that call history. So down the road, when we do replace it, it'll be covering it. You know, our limitations right now in regards to that is based on our system we currently have right now. It's difficult to filter through. We learned several years later,
yeah,
and tally, but that's our system that we use. And down the road, when we look at a new CAD RMS, that'll be one of the things we look at, better mapping and analysis with it.
So that'll be enhanced.
We'll be looking for a better system that we already have to improve upon that when we get to that level. Right now, we use our SunGuard or Central Square. It's changed names about 5 times, but we use that for our analysis, and we can locate locations. We could do crime mapping, and then we built the system with IT, or IT built the system and connected a system that puts the calls for service are accessible to the public now.
Okay, and slide 26. I just wanted to make sure we could get a larger version of that, because sometimes even when they're online, they're so grainy you can't read them. And basically, the bulk of that slide was not really readable because it had so much data on it. And that's it. It had such a wealth of information. It would be helpful to be able to get a copy where you can read it. And then on slide 30, I didn't really see planning called out. Ms. Telford did reference land management in her presentation. And I don't know if you're familiar with the ZEMAS system that they use in LA for land management. Mm-hmm. And so where would that fold into this process? Something along those lines.
Mr. Hernandez,
Yeah,
Mr.
I'll
Lee?
answer that.
Okay.
Yeah. The reason land management doesn't show up in this particular list is because these are new IT initiatives, and the land management is an ongoing effort.
Okay.
And so more than likely, the functionality that you're looking for would be provided in that system. And I have to say, I have not been involved in that project. I do not know what the technical specifications are, but typically land management systems of this type address that kind of functionality.
Just looking out for development service.
Ms. Telford, did you want to add to that? Because I know we're already in the land management upgrade.
Correct.
We are. We have already awarded a contract, and what I do want
Yeah.
to point out is that the land management system costs have already been fully funded by previous actions of the city council, so we didn't want to include that in this funding plan. These are all new costs moving into the future.
Okay. And you talked about cutting the capital funds. I actually think that information technology is part of your capital assets, so that makes a certain amount of sense. But the one question I had is, are we paying the notes for the library out of the capital funds? And so have we really run the numbers to see what would be left if we did this and then we put in the library notes? Would there be anything left for any other capital improvements?
Ms. Telford?
Up until the current fiscal year, well, actually, even this fiscal year, the bonds are paid out of the general fund. This is the first year that we reduced the transfer for the capital projects fund due to some of the financial challenges that we were addressing during the budgetary process. Historically, the bonds are paid for using the general fund.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I thought they would be out of the capital fund, seeing as how it's a capital asset.
It is an allowable use of the capital asset needs set aside, the current 6.5%. The 2017 library bonds are the only bonds that qualify. Our 2006 bonds do not.
Okay, so when this comes back to us, I would like to see what this means in terms of dollars and cents to the capital fund, too.
Sure.
I think we need to see that. And then there was a suggestion about consolidated printing services. And having worked in situations where you have a printer that you share with maybe just a couple people, or where it's very centralized, I found the centralized type of printing system to be horribly inefficient and also just annoying. So what are you envisioning there? One big centralized printing place for all of City Hall or per department? What would be envisioned there?
Madam Mayor, members of City Council. So what we're talking about there is a managed print services. So we go out and we look for a vendor that comes in, takes an inventory of the 413 printers that we have out there. And then they do an audit. For example, they'll look in at an office space and they'll see how many people are using and what they do and how many printers are there. And then they come back and they do a study to say, look, we can put with the 10 printers you have in there, we can consolidate that to 2. And so and then they also add services into that. So if the printer, it's connected. So if it goes down, error codes, things like that, it's automatically sent to the vendor, who then you get a guy showing up that knows that it's broken and is fixed through that method, through that managed services. There is a bit, I believe, of, I think there's a cost savings to it by looking at it and doing a study and understanding what we have out there in the city and understand where, where we can consolidate where it makes sense.
And, well, if we do that study, because I'm thinking printers are pretty cheap, although servicing them might not be, or maintaining them. But the one thing that any such study really need to look into then is time spent where people are waiting while their document is queuing, where people are going, walking down a corridor or taking the extra time away from their work tasks to access the centralized printer, which is what I found very frustrating, the queuing and the having to get up and go to the far end of the corridor to go get my stuff all the time, and then you blow your train of thought.
Mm-hmm. And they factor all that in the study, the locations of where people are at different offices, things like that get factored into it.
Okay. What? And I think that's, and then we have off-site server storage that we utilize, and we have, so that's sort of, and these are secure servers?
Correct.
And then
So what we do is we have multiple redundant backup systems. We have tape to tape. We have disk to disk. We have a method where we send it and we actually use our AWS cloud It's a government cloud. It's a secure cloud just for government use. So we have that type of method that's available to us to use also.
And then what kind of security do we have for when people access, say, when city employees access certain documents from off-site? Are they allowed to access, or should they be allowed to access anything within their work sphere, or only limited amounts of data, or allowed to access provided they use only a city piece of hardware? How do we handle that?
The departments, obviously, there's security built in. Everybody's got, password credentials that they use to get into the various systems. If they need documents from the outside, it happens all the time, where people sending it. But again, it goes through our filters, our cybersecurity filters, and is able to review that package that's coming in, and we can tell if it's got, for the most part, if it's connected to a virus or anything like that.
Yeah, my concern would be something like someone uses a home computer that their kid also uses for gaming, and you could pick up all kinds of foul stuff for gaming.
Absolutely.
For gaming. And so
Yeah, it's a worry. It's actually happened to us in the past. We had somebody bring a thumb drive in from home, had some templates on it they thought would be great to use, brought it in, it had ransomware on it. They didn't know it. They, downloaded this off the internet and downloaded the ransomware with it. Fortunately, our system caught it, quarantined it, and then we were able to eradicate it from the network, but before it did any damage at all. But it's those kind of things that you have to really watch out for.
Yeah, well, a few years ago, I got an email from the LA City Clerk's office that said something like hugs and kisses in the subject line, and obviously that was not what I would normally be getting from the LA City of Los Angeles City Clerk, and so I didn't open it. But obviously their system had somehow become corrupted, and then I heard from a lot of other people that, oh, you didn't open that thing, did you? So I know that we're very vulnerable.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
Just a couple of questions. By the way, great job. Mr. Hernandez, Mr. Ely, everybody that participated, great job. I really appreciate the work that you did, and I'm very impressed. If I could vote today, I'd vote for whatever you wanted me to vote for, but we're not voting today. That's how much I thought it was good. So anyhow, couple of just quick questions. Where do we stand on signal preemption, that project? I don't know who could answer that.
Wait, is that a technology? That's not part of this agenda.
Yeah, it was mentioned in a slide.
We handle connection to those, but I think Chief Stefano might be able to answer where we're at currently.
I will defer to Raja, but I will tell you we are very far down the road with signal preemption. We have signal preemption throughout a large part of the city, specifically the North Costa Mesa, all the way down Harbor Boulevard, and now into the east side of Costa Mesa. I think the project's slated to finish the entire city. Significant progress, though.
Madam Mayor, members of council, we have 100 locations out of 135 intersections that have preemption right now. So most
Okay.
of the city has preemption.
We have 100 intersections and 35 have preemption? Is that what you said?
No, we have
What is it?
135,
135?
and we have 100 are already done.
Oh, okay, so we have 35 left to go.
Yeah, and most of the ones that are left are smaller locations, smaller intersections. So we're not as concerned, but all the major ones have it now.
Okay, good. Thanks. So I'm not asking this question to cast any aspersions, but just to kind of do a post-mortem so something like this doesn't happen again. But as I'm seeing, your slides that say things to the nature of, we're 20 years behind, we're no longer supported. I mean, how did we get to this point? And how do we avoid getting to this point ever again?
Madam Mayor, members of City Council,
You don't have to answer that question.
well, no, how we
No, I'm
how we keep out of this is to make sure that we have a plan and that we follow it and that we refresh it.
Yeah,
We follow it.
right. So shouldn't this be, because we're talking about a 5-year plan, shouldn't it be like a rolling 5-year plan? So every year we add a new year to our 5-year plan? I mean, isn't that the way to have us never be in a situation where we have software that's 20 years behind and not supported?
That's a very good question. Yeah, so what we recommend, so you have a 5-year plan. Many of these systems, particularly the enterprise software systems, these are systems you're going to have for 10, 15, 20 years. But back to the planning question, what we recommend is in a 5-year plan, once a year, every year, that the plan be revisited and refreshed. And if you do that, then you won't have that situation. So after 5 years, you might do another IT strategic plan for the next 5 years.
Right.
But if you've been refreshing it every year, you will not have these big gaps that you see today. I think one of the reasons why we see, not necessarily this city, but many cities, is because they never develop an IT strategic plan.
Right.
And that's how you get to the 20 years and suddenly your systems are 20 years old and out of date. But again, to answer your question, yearly reviews of the IT strategic plan and refresh, and on the 6th year, you do it again.
Good. Always blame people that are no longer with the
Any other
city.
questions?
Yeah, I have another one.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one other question.
Let's stay on topic.
I am on topic. This has to do with IT. Why? How are any of my questions off topic? They've all been spot on. Okay.
Asking them to answer questions.
No, the questions are good. So are the answers. Thank you. So, how is it that we've been able to get such a high customer service rating when we have so many IT obstacles to overcome? What are some of the things that we're doing with respect to customer service? And maybe this isn't an IT question, that are so good that are overcoming our shortcomings.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, I would tend to say our customer service is not stellar. We are behind on a lot of tickets. We just don't have the manpower to do it. Priorities change, different things pop up. So as we're working on a ticket, another higher priority, we don't, out of the 3 people, they have to go off and do something else. So those tickets drop.
Can you go to that slide, please?
Only 64 people responded, right?
From the community survey, or?
Yeah, well, you said somebody said it was good. So what was the one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Ely, I think you're talking about internal.
I was
think
talking internal, yes.
This customer service rating is, to clarify, is this an internal rating or this is external from the community? Page 25.
The online community survey in this particular question was asking a broader question. It did not have to do specifically with IT.
Oh.
It had to do with the public's perception of this city and how it provides services in general.
And I think you said, Mr. Hernandez, that these numbers were good compared to what you would see in other jurisdictions.
Yeah, just to put it in context, what I said was these are the best numbers we've seen in 10 years.
Wow, that's good.
But our firm has worked with 300 cities over 30 years. And this city would fall into the 5th percentile at the top. We do this survey almost every time we do a project like this. And we have data, we collect data from day one. And yeah, this is very high. Just as an observer working here as a consultant, the staff here have very high standards in terms of their professionalism and the dedication and work ethic that they apply to their jobs. This is a very high performing organization.
Thank you. Let's get them some good technology.
Yeah, we would agree.
Any other questions?
No, I don't.
Okay, Councilman Reynolds.
Slide over here. Okay. Mr. Ellie, you talked about the 24/7 IT support. How many of our staff provide that 24/7 support?
3.
3 people.
3 people.
24/7.
3 network engineers are on call. We rotate it.
Wow. Okay. Second staffing question. I wanted to make sure I understood I think Ms. Telford, you presented this, the FTE kind of proposal is, and there were 10 bodies proposed here, but only sort of funded one time in each of the 5 years. So is my understanding then that we have one staff person
coming on for a year to support implementation, or is the end goal that the department grows by 7 or 10 bodies?
The department would ultimately grow as each year. So to put it into context, in the first year, should the plan be approved, the recommendation is to add 2 new bodies to the IT department. The first year of personnel costs would be paid out of the IT replacement fund, where, you know, this new funding source. Future years, the employee would move to the general fund and continue to be funded, but through the general fund instead of the IT replacement fund.
I see, okay. So
These
the
would
first
be
year,
continuing.
I see, okay. I was wondering what
Correct.
there's others costs for, but the intent is that when a position comes online, it stays online to continue
Correct.
supporting. Okay.
Correct.
So how do we reconcile that with the idea that, and I understand that you're understaffed now with the kind of regular services that we're doing, but with the idea that an improved technology system increases productivity and increases efficiency?
I can answer this question in reference to my department, if you're okay with that, Mr. Ely. So for our ERP system, we are not doing our jobs in the best way possible. We are very heavily intensive with paper. We don't use a document management system like a Laserfiche system. We are labor intensive on processes because we are working harder rather than the system working harder. But that also means that the finance department can't accomplish as much with the resources that we have. We've talked a lot over the last 18 months that I've been here about a lot of backlog in projects and analyses because we don't have the staffing resources and the technology doesn't allow for it. When we implement the new ERP system, I think there's a misconception that that means that you put a new system in place, it's like buying a new car. You don't have to maintain it as much. And you can get from point A to point B faster, so you cut some time out of your day. The reality is, it will allow my team to do more of the work that we haven't been able to get done, which means we can get more done in the same amount of time. However, those systems receive continuous updates. In the old days of ERP systems, you would do a large implementation. You'd have 6 months that were the worst months of your life because of how much it took to put in a new system, and then you would operate in that same environment for 20 years. Today's ERP systems, the developers push out updates and patches almost monthly, if not more frequently, and they're fixing little bugs. It's kind of like your iPhone. You're getting updates all of the time, but for us, we have to test every single patch, every update that's sent out. So we become the super users. And right now, I don't necessarily see us as the super users for PeopleSoft. The work to maintain the systems goes up, which is why the IT department needs additional personnel to support those systems. But we can do so much more work, accomplish so much more, do analysis that we haven't been able to do in the past.
Yeah, okay. So the proposal will offset some of the work that you're doing right now, but allow you to, you need that extra people to continue to get through the backlog you have and then expand services. Okay. What is the Parks and Community Services application?
I believe that was an in-house application that's in the TBD column.
No, this was one of the ones that's on in the prioritized column. Yeah.
I believe it's like a reservation type application that they are looking to replace.
Here.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. It's a software application right now. Our registration software requires a lot of manpower, and so it would allow us to offer better customer service, and it would just be more user-friendly for our constituents to be able to more easily register for our programs and services.
Okay, great. That's what we have. We have an online system right now, right?
Yeah, but it's really extremely
charges
limited.
$5 per transaction.
Yeah, and there's a processing fee that comes along with that, so
Right.
we would look for a cheaper alternative as well.
Okay, great, thank you. And then one of the findings was about citywide Wi-Fi. Is that Wi-Fi in city facilities
Yes.
for city staff, right, as opposed to public-facing citywide Wi-Fi?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And similar to the Mayor Pro Tem's question, I think this is my last question, it'd be helpful to see, I wrote down costs for annual refreshments. So the cost, what would be kind of a year 6 cost, year 7 cost, sort of an annual rolling cost to keep things up to date. That'd be helpful to see. Okay. Rough estimates. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Marr?
Thank you. So I don't see a cost for the city Wi-Fi improvement or the IT governance policy. Are these all things that we think we can do without additional costs? Am I just not reading this implementation roadmap correctly?
No, it's on the governance policy, we can do that in-house.
Okay. And improving the city infrastructure Wi-Fi?
Yes, that's also in-house.
Okay. So since this is a study session, I figured I'd give some of my sort of feedback. Year 2 fire mobile data computers. I mean, that's something I've been hearing about for years and years and years, that we have a sort of urgent need for upgrading the computer infrastructure that exists within all of the apparatus. Chief's nodding his head. I'd like to see if there's a way we can move that into year 1. Obviously, I know our budget's going to be tight, but the sooner we can move that up, the better. The same with the CAD RMS system. I mean, my understanding was that was sort of on its last legs. And so waiting until year 4 and year 5 doesn't seem smart.
Mr. Ely, is that a budget issue or is that a system that has to be installed first issue? Can you address that?
Absolutely, Madam Mayor, members of the State Council. Yeah, it ended up being a budget issue. I mean, right now, I think at that point, our CAD RMS system at that point would be about 10 years old.
But can you address the fire mobile data first?
As far as the mobile data computers, we can look at the budget and see if we can move that from year 2 to year 1 to include it with the same installation as the other 65 or 61 data or MDCs for police department. We can see if we could add that to it.
Okay, and then, so that wasn't it wasn't a layering issue, it's just purely budget?
Yes.
Okay, and then what was the other one, the CAD RMS? Year 4, is there any reason it's in year 4 other than budget?
If I may, it was partly because of budget, but quite honestly, it was mostly because of the ERP system. There are only so many staff who can implement large systems at one time. We're currently undergoing the LMS implementation. Right behind that will be ERP, and then right behind that will be CAD RMS. It was a prioritization during the process where ERP was the highest priority.
Okay. I mean, we can save this for a separate conversation, but I just worry in general about waiting 5 years to upgrade that system based on some of what I've heard. I don't know if either of the chiefs want to weigh in on that.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Marr. Yes, so we did discuss that. The current CAD that we have, it's a police fire CAD, and there are a lot of concerns that have come along with that. We've had a number of issues with that. I think it is something that potentially in the next year or so we could see a significant issue with. And that's something that within the strategic plan, in our discussions, the flexibility there to move it from the 4-year up to 1 year if we need to. But there are certainly some concerns that we have with that. They've been voiced, and they will be included in the strategic plan.
Okay. Yeah, I understand I'm asking for the moon here, but some of these public safety things, I get very concerned when we're waiting 5 years. And then the last is, I actually thought Councilmember Reynolds was going to go here. So under the TBD, I think it's $40,000 for Wi-Fi and parks. I'm thinking of the Lions Park lawn in particular. I'd like to see if there's a way in which we can roll out some public Wi-Fi in greater spaces sooner rather than later. And then following the public safety conversation, this EOC communication management system, I know City Manager Farrell Harrison has put some effort into sort of revamping some of our EOC operations. I know this has been a topic of conversation around emergency management in particular, and so I'd like to see what we can do in the EOC probably sooner than 6 years from now. And I think that follows very closely with some of your resilience efforts. So maybe we can consider those a complete package. I think I had one more comment. That was it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank thank you so much for the excellent work and the excellent presentation. I know everyone worked really hard to put this together, and it's been a long time coming. I know as I've sat up here, it's been very frustrating over the years to have such poor technology, and so finally we were coming into the modern era. And just real quickly, Councilmember Guinness, it is very modern to use a centralized printing system. You know, even in my office, we have a centralized printing system that 5 offices share. It's, you don't have the same old ways of having to wait in a queue and all that. It's like instantaneous, the printing. It's all done through wireless. It's not what you think. I'm grateful that we're moving into, sort of a modernization era, and I agree. I like the idea of having a 5-year plan, but then having a refresh. So that should be incorporated into our systems. And I think that this year is all about creating systems and creating plans so that we can have longevity in terms of quality service, quality infrastructure, and the ability to pay for it and plan for it. So I appreciate that question. And then as it relates to the public safety requests, I guess my understanding is you're all working together on this strategic plan. There's been many, many meetings, and that this proposal is what came out of those. Is that incorrect?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, no, that is correct, and we're continuing to work on it, and we still have some areas that we're looking to come together related to public safety, but we're on the same page in terms of moving this forward.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, and then I just had a question about Office 365. I saw that was in the planning, and is that the preferred software, Office 365?
Madam Mayor, yes. We're a Microsoft shop. The Office 365 will give us a number of different efficiencies throughout the city. SharePoint, for one thing. We have an issue with sharing documents in the city. That'll take care of that issue. But there are multiple other things that come with Office 365. It's a way of licensing now where we can get it to the cloud. Okay. You can start syncing all your different devices with Office 365, so you're not missing anything with whatever you're carrying. So yeah, it is a really good, efficient project.
Okay, and then I know that City Manager wanted to make a few comments, and then I'll go to Councilmember Guinness. Ms. Farrell-Harrison?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I just wanted to thank staff once again for all of the work that you've done on this plan. I know that you had a lot of data to assemble, a lot of information to basically put together in a short time frame. So I really appreciate that. And Roy, thank you for your leadership on this. I know you work with many cities and you're an expert in this, so we really appreciate your support. I did want to make a couple of comments about the plan and how we move going forward. This is the first step as we embrace the concept of a plan, a funding strategy. It will be evolving. There are different software systems that have been identified in that to be determined column. And so it will be very similar to our CIP, where it's a rolling 5-year plan. We're continually assessing. There are things that may come off the list and go into the TBD because one of the other items either needs to be expedited and move ahead in years, or it needs to come off of that to be determined list because of a mission critical issue or just because of the urgency, or maybe opportunities even. And so this is the first attempt to put together a plan, which is long overdue. To your point, Mayor Pro Tem, about how do we get here, many cities are in a similar predicament, so it's not uncommon. I will tell you, however, just from my personal experience, what is uncommon is, one, just how outdated the technology is. I'm more accustomed to seeing different technologies that are maybe 10 years old and are in need of replacement. Maybe a couple of systems no longer supported by the vendor, but we have more than our fair share in terms of what I've experienced in the past, particularly in the area of the financial software systems, which that area I am very familiar with, obviously. I was a finance director for 3 different cities, and have worked with finance systems my entire career. I think I'm up to 8 or 9 at this point, and I've never worked with a system as old and as user unfriendly as PeopleSoft. And so I can say that with 100% certainty. And so that poses challenges because the tools that we need to assess to give you the information that you need to make good decisions about our finances and how to use our resources, our financial resources, greatly hampered by the system that we have. And so while this is not uncommon to have needs and to be at the initial stages of putting together a funding plan, I think just how antiquated some of the systems are is different. I also wanted to focus our first part of the presentation on the complexity of the systems because IT departments are typically seen more in that private sector model of laptops, phones, mobile devices, desktops, but what we do as a city is so much more complex than even some Fortune 500 companies because we have very different systems that need to communicate. We have strong regulations, especially in public safety, about the security of the software, all of the different systems that it needs to integrate with, DMV, DOJ, things of that nature. And then on the financial side, there are checks and balances, internal controls about who approves something and then who signs off on it and then who issues the payment. You certainly can't have someone create an invoice, approve the invoice, pay the invoice, pay it out of the checking account, and then do the bank reconciliation. That would be fraud. And so there's so many different layers of security that need to be built in. Councilman Reganish, you had a question about access from the outside. That is definitely a challenge. One of the features that we have is a mobile ID device where it has a serial number that changes every few seconds. And so it is dynamic and it's just personal to an individual. And so it's a way to identify who made what changes in the system. And it changes frequently so that someone couldn't peer over your shoulder, memorize it, and know about it. In fact, you have to type pretty quickly to get that information in before it disappears. And so there's technology like that that a lot of different cities use. There will be some next steps that will be coming before you, and we will take all your comments and respond when we bring the plan back, but we will be bringing the plan back for formal adoption. We will be including the dollar amounts that have been presented to you for next fiscal year in the budget that will be coming before you, assuming that you are feeling comfortable with that first year of the plan is coming up shortly. We will be coming forward with an ordinance amendment that will separate out the funding for the existing CAN between the capital 5% and then the infrastructure technology portion of the 1.5%. So that will also be forthcoming. And then, of course, there'll be a rolling analysis as well. And then lastly, as we move forward in terms of implementing these different systems and adding the staff to be able to help with the implementations, we also need to keep in mind that along with Councilmember Mar's comments about disaster preparedness, business recovery, continuity, and also to your point, Councilmember Reynolds, we have, because our department is so small, we could have single points of failure in terms of an employee moving on, retiring, going to another city, whatever may happen, and we would have very few people to turn to. So part of what we're achieving is not just the efficiencies and productivity for staff in other departments, is creating redundancy, cross-training, and a depth of knowledge within the IT department so that we could have a person on vacation, a person call in sick, and still be able to do the job, as opposed to now we have a lot of people coming in. Sometimes they've left and the city, and they have to come back from where they were just to be able to complete something. And so we want to make sure that we're not in that situation. But we're doing an amazing job with what we have. I have to say, when I first got here, I was very taken aback by how small the department is and how much they do. And I know we have some folks from IT here tonight, and so just wanted to thank you so much for the work that you're doing, because we do access you 24/7, all of us. And whether it's a public safety issue or if Kelly's having an issue with the financial system or the chiefs need something, you guys are always there and you show up and you do a great job. And we know that we can turn to you at any point in time. We're really thankful for that. And so really happy that we were able to bring this forward and excited that we're going to turn a new page, and we will bring these next items that are part of seeing this implementation actually come to life. And so just thank you for your support this evening, and we look forward to bringing this back for a formal adoption.
Thank you. Councilmember Dennis, did you have another question?
Yeah, actually, one of my items just got covered because I was going to mention the need for cross-training. So I'm happy to hear that. There are some larger organizations where they actually have IT people within a department, and that's probably not practical for us because we're not that large of an organization. But would there be, say, point people who do, say, you know, you'd have a couple different people who would typically serve PD, another couple people who might be tasked with serving, be the primary point people for, say, development services or public services? Or would it be diffuse? Because there's something to be said for everybody being a generalist, because then you don't have holes. But at the same time, sometimes you want a little more depth in certain areas. Or is this sort of premature for our plan?
Or Mr. Hernandez?
Councilmember Guinness, no. One of the things that we're looking at is kind of redesigning the organization to look at enterprise, like an enterprise stack for anybody that, you know, the enterprise system. So we'll have people focused on that. And then we'll have another column, so to speak, with departmental type software. So we'll have people in that, but we're planning on building those and then cross-training everybody, as the city manager alluded to make sure that we have that type of coverage.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
Okay, thank you. I just have one more question. So, Ms. Telford, we're talking about your recommendation is 1.5% out of the 6%. Is that going to be enough? Or when you bring this back to us, can you bring us back an option of a 2% out of the 6%, keeping in mind that we have existing projects that we want to make sure we have sufficient funding to cover? Because if it's a budgetary issue for some of this stuff, then let's take 2% instead of 1.5%. Maybe that solves the budget problem.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll provide a 5-year analysis of what my projected costs are, or I'm sorry, the projected 5% and 1.5% is over the next 5 years. You will see that there is an excess that will be set aside in the IT replacement fund. I had mentioned that is partly to address any overages that happen when we do the formal solicitations, also to address some of the TBD, but it really is to be able to provide some reserve so that we don't get this out of date again. I'll provide the details on the 5 and the 1.5%, and then I'll provide alternatives as well, showing different scenarios.
Okay, wonderful. All right, thanks, everybody. At this time, we will have public comment. Anyone want to comment? Hey, no public comment tonight. Okay, and that's all we have for tonight. We'll adjourn this meeting, and we'll see you all on Tuesday. And then, one more thing. I wanted to adjourn the meeting in recognition of, you know, the tragic situation that we had occur with members of our community. There's so many people that we knew, that many of us knew or had some connection to with regard to the tragic helicopter crash. And so I just wanted to adjourn the meeting in honor of Pilot Ara Zobayan, Christina Mauser, Peyton Chester, Sarah Chester, Alyssa Altobelli, Carrie Altobelli, John Altobelli, Gianna Bryant, and Kobe Bryant. Our hearts go out to the families. Thank you.
So is there food upstairs? You notice I'm eating.